Hey guys, this is Matt Keith down here at the Allen County Career and Technical Center. I'm a welding instructor, as most of you can see. Been teaching since actually January 2010. Started with the South Central Kentucky Community and Technical College, and then transferred here to the Allen County Career and Technical Center in January of 2016. I started this program from scratch, very new. We just built this facility. Came into this shop, an empty shop, and with industry backing and of course lots of work from our principals and to getting grant money, we're fortunate enough to get lots of nice equipment down here to help my students to learn the welding trade. We do lots of fabrication. As you can tell, we're into the smokers right now. That's the hot item. There's a smoker started actually for a Dollar General warehouse here in Scottsville, and then there's a propane smoker there. That helps me teach my students. I tie that into my curriculum with the blueprint reading. We draw up a blueprint of these smokers, like that one there especially. Propane one, not so much. We just kind of do that one as we go. But it helps teach my students real world practical applications that they'll be doing, of course, in the field. Main thing I want to talk about today is how I tie this piece of equipment into my curriculum. This is a Miller LiveArc workstation. It's a training system. Starts my students with zero experience up to an experienced welder. It helps them learn the travel speeds, weld parameters, electrode stick outs, travel and work angles, things like that. The screen we're looking at right now, of course, this is an all touch screen, even with gloves on. That was the big thing for a welder. You don't have to take your gloves off. Of course, that's a safety hazard. But what we're looking at right now, this screen is our WPS, which stands for Work Procedure Specification. This is not only just telling our students what assignment to use, but this ties it into weld certification. You have to go by a WPS for weld certification for a particular weld joint. So let's say we click on this T-joint here. Let it load. This screen we're looking at is our WPS. It tells us everything we need to know about this particular weld joint. It teaches the students our voltage, our wire speed, and our amperages. It tells them what joint design, if we're using a T-joint fillet weld. It tells us what base material thickness and what type of steel it is. Our shielding gas here, it tells us we need to use a 75% argon, 25% CO2. That not only just teaches my students what gas to use for this weld joint, but we go into detail about why we use that gas, why we would use different gases for different modes of metal transfer and different weld positions. Of course, and it does tell us our cubic feet per hour, which is how much flow rate we're using, how much gas is actually coming out the end of the MIG gun. Then over here it tells us our technique, which is how we manipulate the MIG gun. We're using a stringer bead here, which means no manipulation. We're just pushing it down through there. Our filler metals, which is our weld wire, teaches them what all that means as far as the ER70S-6. Electrical characteristics, we're in the short circuit transfer mode. That leads into a lot of discussion about the 4 different modes of metal transfer. Then of course we go down here, and like I said, it does do our voltage, our wire speed, our amperage, and all of our welding angles, our work angle, our travel angle, our contact tip to work distance and travel speeds, and how you're aiming it. Now, once we have selected this table will calibrate. That's what it's trying to do now. Well, I had it up for overhead welding earlier. Now we can get it to calibrate. And what this is doing, if you look on this table, we have these 4 holes here. There's little sensors down in there there's 3 eyes up in this cage, we should call it, in this case, that are looking at this table and the weld piece that we're looking at. Now we can do everything else from the gun, because it asks us to close that screen before we do anything else. You probably can't see it. It says to tack and clamp the parts. We can click next, Now, since we're not really going to weld, so I've already got some parts clamped out down here. Now it's going to ask us to calibrate the weld joint. We use this tool, our calibrating tool. It's got these 3 sensors in it that, of course, those eyes up there look at. One thing this does is, of course, tells us where this is on our table and how long it is. Now, this machine will not judge a weld. A completed weld has to be 3 inches or longer on this machine. So if it's under 3 inches, it's not going to complete your weld. And once we have a completed weld, it's going to have a line graph that comes out on all 5 of these. And it's going to have a baseline in the middle. There's a dotted line there. That, of course, is our desired travel speed or contact tip to work distance. However, and it, of course, is going to give them a grade over here in this column. And they have 5 chances to get a 90 or above. I've set this machine up to where they have to have at least a 90 to have a passing or a completed weld joint, a completed assignment. You have 5 chances to get 3 of those, and then once those 3 are completed, I take those 3 and average all 3 of them together to give them a grade for their assignment on this particular one. And like I said, they can log in. We can give them their own login information. They can log in, and it saves all their welds. And then we can put a jump drive in. It saves it to a jump drive. I can create folders inside the classroom for each one of these students' grades to see the progression on how they are, of course, progressing throughout our class. To me, this is a very, very useful tool in our curriculum here. This only teaches, right now, it only teaches gas metal arc welding, which, of course, I use this machine in my blueprint class because blueprinting and fabrication mostly is our gas metal arc welding process. And then, of course, in my gas metal arc welding class, I can teach this all positions too. I had the arm up earlier. That's what was causing some calibration issues. But let's go ahead. We'll pull this arm up. I can weld in the overhead position by putting a clamp in that arm. We can move the bent arm over here to the right-hand side. We can customize it for a right-handed or left-handed student. Main reason, not main reason, but a huge reason why I bought this machine or this training center is it's a non-biased way for my students to get graded. Students can't come in and say, well, Mr. Keith likes that student better than he likes me. They weld it. It gives them instant feedback. It sparks, of course, most of my students. I do have a few female students, but most of my students are young males, and it sparks a lot of competition between these students. They come in here, one of them will get an 87, the next one says, well, I can beat that. It keeps them active and engaged. Huge, huge tool in my teaching here at the Allen County Career Technical Center. A few other things. Here's a few of the beads, of course, my students have laid today using this. One other thing that we're doing here, I prepare my students for the 3G, 4G state certification. I feel like it's a better certification for my students. They can take it with them. We offer a 2F certification through Kentucky Department of Education. The only problem with that is that unless that student is working for the Kentucky Department of Education, they cannot technically use that certification anywhere else. With this certification, the Kentucky Department of Transportation owns this certification. It's a DOT certification. Any state-funded project in the state of Kentucky, a student can go weld on. It's a lot tougher for my students to pass this. This is in a vertical. This is a student's weld here in a vertical position. It's not quite filled out yet. It's actually still warm. They just completed it a while ago. So this is getting very close to being finished. And of course, we'll cut it into coupons and bend it to a U with our test bender. And it can only have 1/8 inch of tearage in that. It's a pretty strenuous test. And once they complete this vertical one, they have to do one of these overhead as well. It cuts out the weak in the welding field. So that's all I got today for you all. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation about my curriculum here at Allen County Career and Technical Center and how I use my equipment to aid in my teaching. Thank you. Have a great day.